Welcome to Only for Your Ears and today's episode. But first, I'd like to give a special thanks to people that have liked, shared, and subscribed. This is very much appreciated. Now for episode 53, Heartache by Hans Christian Andersen, which I've renamed as Pearls from the Heart. The structure will remain the same, starting off with a brief summary where I'll digress in a few highlighted sentences and give a reflection. Moving on to my critical review on how this fairy tale plays in today's society using parallels from a recent film. Then we'll move on to the trigger points using my life's journey dealing with difficult obstacles and grief and overcoming that. And last but not least, the quote to end. Let's begin with Heartache, or Pearls from the Heart by Hans Christian Andersen is a poignant tale about a mother's love for her son and her journey through pain and loss. I digress. Yes, these pains of life are necessary treasures that help us to appreciate magical and special moments that emerge from traumatic experiences. The story begins with a mother who is desperate to save her sick son. She visits a wise old woman who tells her that her child can be saved if she can find a plant with the cure. I digress. Plants and flowers are loaded with life-giving nutrients for healing, which have often been underestimated, which only grows in a distant land near a churchyard. I digress. Interesting, this life-giving plant can only be found in a place where they bury the dead. The mother sets out on her journey filled with hope and determination. I digress. Filled with hope, the essence of life propels her on this journey to find this one cure to save her boy. Reflection, the power of a mother's love. The story demonstrates the depth of a mother's love for her child, as she is willing to go to great lengths and face numerous trials to save her child's life. Her love transcends the boundaries of life and death, showcasing the strength of this bond. She was almost willing to sacrifice her life for her sons. Along the way, the mother encounters various obstacles and tests of her devotion. I digress. Challenges which are used in life to strengthen character to prevail in her pursuit. She must confront wild animals, dangerous terrain, and harsh weather conditions. I digress. How much do you want to save your son? Are you willing to experience death in place of your son? Despite these challenges, she remains steadfast in her love for her child, drawing on her inner strength and determination to keep going. I digress. These are the inner resources that make it possible for the mother to complete her mission. Reflection, the role of faith. Throughout the story, the mother's faith in God is tested as she encounters various trials. The story encourages readers to maintain faith in the face of adversity and trust that there is a higher power guiding their path. Finally, the mother reaches the churchyard and finds the plant. I digress. Victory truly prevails as she finds the plant. Overcome with joy, she thanks God for guiding her journey and giving her the strength to succeed. I digress. Praise God indeed. Was this her journey to save her son, or was the journey really about faith? She rushes back home, eager to save her son. However, when she arrives, she finds that her son has already passed. I digress. All that distance for nothing. Reflection, the relief of the abundance of elation at finally arriving at the place to capture the plant must have been indescribable, only to be crestfallen by the passing of her son. The very reason she took this hazardous journey in the first place. Devastated by the loss of the child, the mother's heartache consumes her. In her grief, she discovers that the plant was found has a power beyond just curing her son's illness. I digress. Metaphoric and sensations and healing properties found in the plant is meant for her. The wise woman knew her son was going to die before she sent the mother on her journey. It was meant to alleviate the pain in her heart when she experienced the grief that she was going to experience. As she holds the plant, her heartache begins to subside and she gains a newfound sense of hope and understanding. I digress. This plant was for her to heal her own broken heart as her beloved son rests in peace. Reflection: the inevitability of death and suffering. The story serves as a reminder that death is an unavoidable part of life and that everyone must experience loss at some point. Despite the mother's best efforts, she is unable to prevent her child's death, illustrating the limits of human agency in the face of mortality. In Heartache, Hans Christian Andersen explores themes of love, sacrifice, grief, and power of faith. The mother's journey serves as a testament to the strength of a mother's love and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable pain and loss. I digress. The ability to experience gratitude and appreciation through healing her heart, her child's illness and consequent death acted as a catalyst to heal her. What a beautiful story. What a beautiful fairy tale. Now for my critical review on how this fairy tale plays in today's society. The original title of this fairy tale is fitting, with heartbreaking authenticity captured by the author who had borne witness to such tragedies throughout his life. The agonizing journey to find the cure for her son within a simple plant in a courtyard where the deceased lay is overwhelming in its narrative. For this journey isn't for the boy, it's for the mother to realize her faith, love, hope, and joy that's contained within her, in spite of this traumatic situation she is facing. I don't know how many of us have had this type of experience, but it's interesting how this incredible struggle is for the woman to celebrate her life while experiencing the loss of her son. Many years ago, while I was living in the Netherlands, I witnessed something similar. From a distance, I was a dancer coming to the end of my career, and I would clean houses to make money. Anyway, one of my clients was a demi-principal in the Dutch National. I knew her husband from New York, who was a dancer but had retired. One day, she came home quite sad and said one of the male dancers had fallen off stage in rehearsal while trying to save the director. The idea of the I'll give my life to save you, just like the mother was willing to do in the fairy tale. Unfortunately, the dancer fell off into stage and into the orchestra pit and severed the main artery to the brain on one of the orchestra stands. They contacted the parents and asked them to come to the Netherlands, where they consequently turned off the machine. He bled to death from the injury. The aftermath demonstrated the grief they felt for their son and the bitterness too. Their son had left money in his will for an Afro-Brazilian dancer he still loved, even though they had split up, but they had been together for over 10 years. and his parents cut her out of the inheritance he left her. This clearly illustrates how important the grieving process is. Their hearts were filled with such remorse they couldn't reconcile their son's wishes for the woman he so dearly loved, therefore denying her of his ultimate wish, an act of love and respect for her. Now let's move on to a film that I think gives a good, interesting parallel. Plot, The Son, and I digress. The inevitability of death and suffering. The story serves as a reminder that death is an unavoidable part of life and that everyone must experience loss at some point, despite the mother's best efforts. She's unable to prevent her child's death, illustrating the limits of human agency in the face of mortality. This film, I think, is quite interesting. Peter Miller is recently married to his second wife, Beth, and is raising their newborn baby. His ex-wife, Kate, unexpectedly shows up and says their 17-year-old son, Nicholas, is depressed and has dropped out of school. Although Peter barely knows Nicholas, he agrees to house him. Peter also has a terrible relationship with his father, Anthony, who was cruel and was absent for most of his life. However, Peter has moved on from his child trauma and hopes to be a good father to Nicholas. Despite trying to bond with Nicholas, Peter refuses to acknowledge that he has deeply wounded him by cheating on Kate. But when Nicholas attempts suicide and is placed in an inpatient treatment facility, Peter belatedly grasps his responsibility for the situation. A week later, Peter and Kate bring Nicholas home after feeling sympathetic to his pleas that he regrets the decision and that led to the facility. Once back home, Nicholas makes tea for his parents and happily talks about seeing a movie as a family. As he leaves to shower and his parents discuss how things seem better, Nicholas shoots himself dead. Traumatized by his son's suicide, Peter later fantasizes about what Nicholas' life could have been like if he had lived. Beth comforts him while he expresses guilt and remorse and blames himself for the tragedy. This is really, really sad, people, but I think also very manipulative of the son. I really, really do. Because the relationship between his mother and Peter had ended, clearly, and he moved on. But it wasn't so much the wound that Kate had, it was the wound that he had in his heart, and he could not forgive Peter for that. You know, our ego gets in the way of forgiveness. He couldn't forgive him. And so in the end, he decided to use his pain of unforgiveness because of his ego and punish his father, which in actual fact, I think it's quite disgraceful, but in a way, it acts as a catalyst to bring Beth and Peter together and his new formed family. Now I'm going to move on to my trigger points. Now, this was interesting because this fairy tale really sort of took me to the place of what I went through for 2.5 years. And let's begin. When I was going through my tower moments over the past 2.5 years, I felt like I was experiencing a maze of uncertainty. I didn't know what or how to feel. It was a numbing feeling where it felt I had to shut off any normal responses just to get through this chapter of my life. I didn't feel particularly strong enough, though. Upon reflection, I was strong enough to overcome the four missions or hurdles that lay before me on this journey. I learned about how I allowed my ego, just like the boy did in the film, how I learned my ego to fill itself with the hurts, which consequently cast a shadow over my ability to forgive anybody and to forgive and overcome emotional trauma I endured throughout my life. And it wasn't until I surrendered my pain and grief and I was able to transmute difficult family karma. You know, just like the son Nicholas was going through in his life, and also Peter. But with forgiveness and healing and surrendering that grief, they were able to, Peter was able to do it, but of course, Nicholas wasn't. So I transmuted negative generational family karma that came as a way to push me to the place where I could bring love back into my heart, where it can warm my heart, warm my heart inside and out, and that I didn't have to love people on a deep personal level just to care about them. I could still care about them and love them universally without allowing them to hurt my life in any way. The death of my cat, cancer, my mother's death, the loss of my home, and my job were the hidden treasures and challenges I would experience. And with this, there was a recognition of realizing their true value wasn't to hurt me, but it was to heal me. And if you were to ask me, Melody, would you like to go through all of that stuff again? I probably would say no. But I am so proud of myself, just the way that woman in the fairy tale must have been extremely proud of herself when she started to allow love to come back into her life after she surrendered all that hurt and all that grief and that unforgiveness. So that's the end of today's episode. And I'd just like to leave with my quote. It was a beautiful fairy tale, I thought, an adult fairy tale. Healing is a lifelong blessing, gift, and lesson we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong lesson, blessing, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Until next time, goodbye.